Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining our Race Today podcast, which is a 1-hour talk show focused on racism in the United States today, as well as sharing a platform to eradicate racism across the United States. I am Dr. Alicia Williams. I'm one of our co-producers for today's conversation that's going to be focused on Black fathers. And I'll hand it over to Sherelle as one of our other co-producers to introduce herself.
Hi there, my name is Sherelle Zicki. I'm one of the co-producers for Race Today, and I'm actually looking forward to have this conversation with Black fathers and how they parent and migrate through this lovely place we call America.
Thank you, Sherelle. So with that, I will begin with brief introductions of our panelists as I hand it over to each of you to share very brief introductions. I'll start with TW.
Good afternoon, Tariq Williams, father of two, a boy and girls, 17 and 13, currently living in Northern Virginia, but raised up in San Diego, California.
Thank you, Tariq. We'll now hand it over to Derek Williams.
Good afternoon, I'm Derek Williams. I'm a regional audit tech here in California, born in Mississippi, but for the most part raised here in California. I'm the father of 5 daughters who I absolutely love.
Thank you, Derek. And we'll hand it over to Dr. Lee.
Hello, I'm Dr. Mark Lee. I'm a developmental psychologist, and I am originally from Miami, Florida, currently living in the Maryland area, and I have a son who's 10 years old.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. And we'll hand it over now, finally, to Mike Ezeki. If you can unmute yourself.
Okay. All right. My name is Matt Eski. I'm a father of 5. My children were all born, except one, were all born in Florida, Miami, Florida. And I'm a realtor. I currently live in Ontario, Canada, Mississauga to be specific.
Thank you so much, Mike. Well, with that, thank you so much to these incredible panelists. I'll hand it over to CR Gibbs, who is our moderator. Thank you, CR.
Right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Williams. Again, and I want to give a shout out to Sherelle as well. I want to begin by addressing the panel, gentlemen and brothers. Gentlemen and brothers. My first question to get us started today is, how do you define fatherhood? And who wants to step out first? How do you define fatherhood?
Well, I guess I'll take a stab at it. For me, fatherhood, I'm a God-fearing man, so fatherhood comes from the greatest of dads, and that's what God is. He is the greatest of dads. So my role as a father and how I define fatherhood is being the example that Jesus Christ set for us. And so there's obviously a certain level of right and righteousness. And then, of course, the discipline that goes along with that. So for me, I guess the definition of fatherhood is following the example that was set for us, as far as me and my house, by Jesus Christ. So that's the definition of fatherhood for me, is following that example.
Thank you. Thank you, Brother Derek. I appreciate that. But that doesn't mean the rest of you get off the hook for the first question. So, Brother Tariq, you want to jump in?
Yeah.
How do you define fatherhood?
Yeah, it's tough. I kind of agree with Derek. So this is an example. So my father died when I was young, but I guess the brief time that he was alive and I was there, I saw him. There's a tradition like the provider, the leader, protector, the one who brought standards to my life, the one who led, the one who taught, we mentioned coaching and whatnot. He was my baseball coach. So just in a short time, just little examples he's presented there. And for me, it's just tough. I had other male role models in my life, but as far as a father example, that's what I got from my father.
Thank you very much. Brother Mark, how about yourself?
Well, yes,
How do you define it?
I do agree with both examples indicated. It does start with God the Father and how we lead our households as fathers. I too do define fatherhood as a role where that individual is seen as being dependable and involved, being a compassionate and empathetic person toward the child as they guide them along their development through life, and being a role model, setting examples and standards for them. That's the definition that I would apply, and I try to exude in fatherhood.
Okay, I want to jump in for a minute. I do agree with everything that everybody says. My own definition of fatherhood is like being a custodian. Your ability to groom anyone you have in your custody, there will be a reflection of you, because especially when it comes to being a father to a child, that's going to be a reflection of you. And you try to instill all you can while being prayerful and all the likes. You still want to instill your ability to put a good moral in them, so that when they go out there, anything they do, it will always come back to you, because as a father, you want the reflection of you to show in all your children. So that's my definition of a father.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. What is the most satisfying factor that makes up being a father? Anyone?
Yeah.
Okay.
For me, I get a lot of satisfaction and joy seeing my children implement my teachings or wisdom or whatnot. If it's come with skills that I preach that you're gonna need later on in life, and it just clicks, they get it, they start doing it. I don't know if it's in sports, if I'm teaching my son certain things and then it clicks and he gets it. I just got a lot of joy out of them implementing my teachings and following them.
Wonderful. Thank you. Next, let's put it up. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think for me, to go with what Tariq said, is I find an immense amount of joy when my kids are happy, when I take them to the beach and they glow from the wonderment of being at the beach, or when I buy them a new bike and they get on it for the first time and they're ecstatic. I think one of the greatest joys that I have is seeing the happiness and the joy on my kids' faces, to know that they are experiencing something extremely exciting. And hopefully, as a father, I've been able to engage in that and support that.
Great. Great.
Okay. Yeah. All right. For me, I would want to derive the pleasure that I get from my children being well educated, being enlightened. The fact that their mind are all educated, and the fact that they can join the civilization and still have an impact out there. I just going to draw an example from my own daughter, Sherelle. She has been the source of my joy. And in African culture, it's kind of different from other cultures, because we always put an pride and joy in the male child or the family. But when I look at my first daughter, Sherelle, she's just the source of my joy because of what she has accomplished at this point in her life. All my children are highly achieved ones, but I just want to take a special pride in their ability to join the civilization and just carry on. I'm really, really happy when I look at every one of them and all their accomplishments. That's where my joy comes from.
Thank you. Brother Mark.
Yes, I similarly agree across the board. I think I get a lot of joy from I just look at moments, and my son, always looking to emulate me in some way, and looking for that approval, looking back to say, look, Dad, I did it, just what you told me. So there's a lot of joy in that, you know, and coaching him in sports or academics, anything related to that. It's always to seeing him exude himself and carry his character into different environments where people recognize the things that we've instilled in him. So he's, in his 10 short years, have been a great source of joy.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Well, when it comes to gender roles, do you believe that you raised your children to have the same toolkit, if you will, the same set of abilities in growing up that you had, or what differences have you seen in that delicate area of gender roles, which is so much in the newspaper today? Since you happen to be on my screen, Brother Mark, I'm not going to let you go just yet. Would you say us some knowledge?
Well, I see myself as a masculine male, but I'm not a macho male. I'm just a man. And I think a lot is said into that these days, as you've indicated. I think a lot of times it gets a little convoluted. But the ways in which I raised my son in particular was to just be that, to be who he is, who God ordained him to be from birth. And with that, to have compassion and to be empathetic towards others, to be concerning and caring, and to engage himself in the multitude of ways with sensitivity towards the human condition, and not to so much be this puffed up characteristic of what they term toxic masculinity today, but to just be himself and engage with others in a respectful way.
Thank you. Brother Asike, I thought I saw you. Did you want to say something now?
Okay, well, I will. What was the question again?
The question is, when it comes to gender roles, do you believe that you raised your children to have the same series of abilities, the same toolkit that you had in growing up?
It's often hard for my own, because of the culture that I came out of, it to instill that because of the cultural differences, right? Sometimes when what I'm really most happy about again is the fact that they are receptive of being educated in, and their mind is sound based on the education. Once they have that confidence instilled in them, they can really function out there. So the gender doesn't really play too much in my own application, my approach to them. All I do teach everyone else to be confident everywhere they go, because once you open your mouth, whatever you say, you are accountable for it. So I'm happy that they can function out there, and that's the height of civilization. The ability for you to relate to one another when you go out there. That's the height of civilization. That I instill in them that they can do anything they set their mind in.
Absolutely, absolutely. Brother Derek?
Yeah, I wanted to chime in on this piece because I have some experience with this with my daughters and the gender role and this piece and how it flows. And I definitely agree with you, Dr. Lee. This is a God-fearing house. And so first and foremost, that's what we're going to talk about, is what's in the Bible and what Jesus said we should do and should not do. But there is an immense level of compassion and understanding that you also have to have. For we know love covers a multitude of sins, so we work towards that. And I think you can only, or you should, in my opinion, raise your children to be who you want them to be in the eyes of Christ, but also who they want to be. Mm-hmm. And so that is such a delicate balance. So when we talk, I guess, about a toolkit or different styles or techniques as to how you raise your children, for me in my house, first it's going to be God, and then it's going to be how do we help you understand that, as well as what you may be going through and experiencing, and how those two things hopefully one day can grow together and we can work towards a goal. It is a difficult role. It truly is, because you love the word, but you love your child. And so you have to find a way for those two things to work. And it does, as Dr. Lee said, take a immense amount of compassion. These are kids. So do the best that you can.
Right, our brother Tariq.
Yeah, it's a tough question. I think last I heard there's 68, over 60, I don't know, over 60 different gender identities. I don't know how to be other than I consider myself masculine. I don't know how the other ones function or their roles or what are characteristics of those other ones. So all I can do is model for my children and model for other people. If they want the outcomes that I had in life and how, we talk about, I like history. If they want to model what I've done and they see the way my outcomes in life or the way I interact with people, then, if they want to label it masculine, just follow that. And then if they choose to be one of the other 60, maybe, I don't know, maybe I can help them. I don't really understand those, but we can work through it together if they're trying to discover those things.
That's incredible. 60. I had not read that one to read.
Yeah.
I just had to jump back in. Yes, CR. 60. Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, I mean that's where we are, which leads me into our next question. We're growing up and we're watching our children grow up into a world that is far different than the one we grew up in. What did you learn? What imperishable values did you learn from your father that you apply in your everyday life to your own family? And the door is open.
Yeah.
Well,
go ahead, Derek. Go ahead, Derek.
Okay. I was going to say, my father, who happens to be Alicia's father, he was, dare I say, arrogant at times. But one thing that I learned from him out of some of that arrogance is he always used to say, "I'm a grown man. I don't have to lie to anyone." And another thing that he instilled in me was don't be afraid of the work. And it's something that I use with my children from a right and righteousness perspective. Is you don't have to lie. You can say what it is and then deal with those consequences. And then the other thing that he taught me was not to be afraid of the work, whatever that work is. If it's homework, if it's yard work, if it's your career, whatever that work is, don't be afraid of the work and just get it done. And so utilizing the right and the righteousness thought process and not having to make up a falsehood about something that happened or the way something may be going, and then not being afraid of the work, taking all of those and bundling it up and using it as a tool to help raise my children has been immense, because they grow up to be strong and confident and truth tellers. And I enjoy that. I love that.
Wonderful. Brother Ezeki, how would you answer the question, what did you learn from your own father that allows you to apply it in today's more complicated world?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. What I did learn from my father is because my father fathered a lot of children. What I learned from him is the patience, because these children, even back then, they can push your limits, But in this day and age, the civilization gave us a lot, and they take away a lot. So the patience my father instilled in me has gone to play, because when I have any discussion with my children, that patience come to play anytime, because I see because when I remember where I came from versus where I'm at, it's a sharp difference the way you even respond to your father when they talk to you, versus here, where me and my daughter stand toe to toe and we argue. So that patience come to play in me greatly when I deal with them.
Thank you very much. Brother Mark, how about you? What did you learn from your own father?
Well, I learned a lot about resiliency and strength from my father. I think overall, is being able to fight through the tough times of life and not allowing it to overwhelm you, and being strong for your family. You know, having to not be afraid of the work, as Derek indicated. You know, whatever that work may be, and in terms of developing yourself, and then the whole idea of love and pride and respect for oneself and family as well. My father was from South Georgia, a small town in South Georgia called Vienna. Actually, Vienna. My mom's from Fitzgerald. They were neighboring towns in South Georgia, and so they instilled a lot of those old Southern values in us to live forward. And so I try to put that within my child to help them understand that things will not always be as easily managed or accomplished, and that sometimes it takes a little grit to be able to work through it. And I've seen him do that. Even he's had homework assignments where he's had to stay up a little later, maybe to push through to complete the task. And I think those are things that I took from my father and my childhood upbringing with my older brothers as well. I'm the youngest of 7, so my father became ill when I was young, so a lot of what I had with him from my earlier childhood, that strength and resiliency and love and pride, was emulated then by my brothers, that allowed me to have them as role models in that capacity as well.
Thanks a lot. Now, what values do you want to instill in your own children that you learned from your father? What values do you want to inject into the next generation, into your own youngins?
Yeah.
And I'm not going to put Brother Mark on the spot because he's the last one on the screen. Who wants to take it? Terry?
I'll take it because it ties into what I learned from my father. So my father passed away, I said before, when I was young, but my mother, all throughout my childhood, would say, your father would say, be prepared. That's the famous thing to say, be prepared, be prepared. So I am very much, and I don't know if that's where it came from, I'm very much a planner. Like anything I want to look and see, okay, what's the steps? What's the sequence? What's the objective? How do we get there? So I'm a planner. And some people say that's, insight and strategic and whatnot. That's very much me. But for my grandfather, who was very much a part of my life, from him, he was an airplane mechanic and a mechanic. He kind of instilled in me that don't be afraid to get your hands dirty. Just take stuff apart to figure out how it works. And I was always taking stuff apart, just learning, inquisitive. Don't be afraid to take something apart to see how it works. And that also ties into continuing learning. My grandfather, I guess part of that inquisitiveness and taking stuff apart and seeing how it works, he was always reading, always reading. My grandmother would say, he should have been a college professor or something because he was always seeking knowledge. So for my children, I wanted those two things: be prepared and don't be afraid to get your hands dirty and learn something.
Wonderful. Brother Derek?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Tariq and Dr. Lee on the things that were said in regards to what you've learned from your father and how you apply. And I think it ties into that last question as well. I want to instill those very same values into my children. I want them to know, you stand up for yourself, you work through whatever difficulties come your way, and you face it head on. And, you may struggle, you will struggle, obviously, through quite a few things. But I want my kids to know that I always have their back. I think it's so important for a child to know that regardless of what happens, my father is there for me. Regardless of if I'm right or I'm wrong, my father is there for me. And so that's something that I learned at a young age from my father that I want to make sure that my kids continue to have, because I have that with them. I think there needs to be an equality of the amount of love you give your children to go with the amount of discipline. And those two must be equal, or there should be greater love maybe than the discipline. But if you have a child that knows you love them, but you will also discipline them, they will learn that equality of respect between those two ideas. And they will use that in their life as they continue to grow. I remember once a short story when I was giving my daughter, we used to give them spankings, don't have to anymore, but I would take her into the bathroom and I would give her a spanking and she really wouldn't want one. And I would say, yesterday, Daddy said he was going to take you to the store and buy you a Barbie. Did he? And she would say, yes, he did. And I said, and last week when Daddy said he was going to buy you a bike, did he take you and buy you a bike? Yes, you did. This morning, when I said, don't play with knives or you will get a spanking, did you play with the knife? Yes, you did. So should I do like I did with the bicycle and the Barbie and follow through on my word as a father and do what I said I was going to do? And, you know, they reluctantly shake their head. And I said, in that case, I have to be true to my word. My word was, you will get a spanking. And so just like you got a Barbie, you will get a spanking. And those ideas, I think, help them grow into understanding what is right and what is true and what should be and how things should work. Helps their strength level, I think.
Yes, it's someone else want to. Yes, please go ahead, brothers.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. My father always tell us that it looks impossible until it's done. Whatever you do, you know, you just put in a hard work. You know, in the beginning it looks rough. Just like you wake up late at night when you should be sleeping to study. At the end of the day, when you get to an exam hall, it's going to be just a cakewalk for you, as opposed to you not doing anything about, you know, when you know you have a test coming up. So hard work pays. The perseverance in hard work is priceless. So that's what I instill in. That's what I really like about my children. They all work hard for everything they do. Even though I talk, and they think that I make too much noise. But you know, at the end of the day, you know, when I see what they have accomplished to date, I'm very, very happy that, you know, that hard work pays. Boy.
All right. Did anyone else want to make a comment before we go to the next question? Want to make sure I get everybody.
Well, I just agree with everything that was said, particularly the last comments made by Mr. Ersiki. The ideal of anything is possible, right? The until you do it, anything's impossible until you do it. So I teach my son that whole idea of that resiliency, that perseverance, having confidence in himself, and knowing that he can do that. Impossible is I am possible. And so teaching him that positive frame of mind, I think, has been something that he's exuded and has helped him to continue to develop himself. So I do agree with a lot of the comments that the others have said as well.
Okay. Anyone else? Comment? Further comment? Again, we mentioned this before, but we live in a challenging time. And what are the challenges of raising your children in society today? And I won't give you an unlimited number, but if you could give some examples of perhaps the top 3 or 4 of the greatest challenges that you face in terms of raising your children in society today. And much like fear factor, I'm going to ask you to volunteer before we point a finger at you. So who would like to volunteer? Again, the question on the floor, what are the challenges of raising your children in society today?
Yeah, I want to go back to, I guess the gender's one. We said that the number,
Okay.
how do I guide my children through that? Because all I know is me and the way I was raised. So there's new frontier, new ways people are gonna connect and live and whatnot. My fear is that I won't be able to help them if something happens. And race is always the type. Race is still an issue in this country, but it's a matter of fact, and it's just making sure they know how to cope with it. They're going to face it in their life. They might have peers who don't see things the same way they do, but how do they cope and how do they move on? Those are just the things that are always in my life, because that can detract you, either from success in your family, success in your community, success in society or whatnot. So those are always things I think about.
Thanks for the 3.
I think probably being at the top of our brains is what's different today than then. Obviously, it's social media. I mean, it has such a hold, a grasp on our children, and the pandemic unfortunately made that worse. where you didn't have a lot of outlets, and social media became the outlet for most kids today. And so we as parents here in our household struggled with social media trying to raise our kids. And so we had to create those boundaries and maintain some sort of control over that. Because, you know, as parents, I mean, you're a parent 24/7, but you're not parenting 24/7. Someone else is during those times you are not. And that someone else over the last few years, and definitely in this day and time, has been social media and the influence it has on our kids as to, you know, how they dress or how they talk, who they interact with, and what avenues and adventures they want to take on. Social media presents that to everyone. And, you know, there's a lot of good, obviously, in social media, but there's a lot of harm in it too. And so we have to wrestle with that and rope that in and keep that at bay. I think that is, you know, to go with the things that Tariq said, of course, race and gender, and then social media also is such a huge face on this Mount Rushmore of problems. I think for me, that's been one of the biggest struggles recently, mainly I think due to the pandemic.
Yes, I appreciate that. Brother Ezekiel, what do you see as the challenges of raising your children in society today?
Well, the challenge is not different from everyone else's challenges. But what it is that the conflict between the social media and the education system, you know, you can do all you may without a higher power. It will not be good enough. I still kneel down every 5 a.m. in the morning till 6. I do my prayers, you know, and mention my children one by one and put them in God's hands. That's where I draw my strength from. Mm-hmm. All my children may not believe in the power of prayer, but I certainly do, because we can't do it alone. I just cannot do it all by myself. You know, I know it's hard for you to try to talk to your daughter. You are in Canada, she's in Virginia, and another one is in Arizona. It's hard for you to just raise children over the phone. You know, so what I draw my strength from is where I'm praying for every one of them, and I still try to talk to them about the implication of what's out there, because the conflict is so enormous. You know, they struggle with self identity, you know, and all kinds of, you know, like when they grow, their peer pressure is there, and what is right, what is wrong, they still struggle with it. So when I get them on the phone, I try to talk as much as I to them, but then my result is just to pray for them for God's guidance. That's hard.
Okay. Brother Mark?
Yes, I do agree. You know, my son, I've taught him as my mom taught me in particular. As I indicated, my father was ill early on, but you know, we pray every morning. You know, as he leaves the home, he's saying his morning prayers as we're driving to school. So putting him in God's hands is the first thing that I try to do every day. We have him enrolled in a Christian school actually as well, so he can continue to be protected and around that mindset, so that development. I originally thought about the ideal of racism mostly because we've dealt with the issue of gender a bit. He's had some classmates with the dads and the moms and things like that. So we've had brief conversations about those kind of ideals. We've had not much with social media. He's still just entering into that realm. He's young still. I'm thankful not, you know, I hear 17 and 13 and I'm like, oh, I can't, you know, like I can wait for those moments to come, and thankfully it's just him. But the biggest thing is racism, and he's been seeing it throughout his life. Actually, we would travel places, and he'd be at the airport. And when he was younger, you know, he's just a real friendly, gregarious kid, very outgoing. He speak to everyone, want to play with the kids, and these other little kids would like look at him as if he was an alien and not speak. And he'd ask me questions about it, you know. So from very early on, I had to teach him that they were just not raised properly, and to continue to be you, have confidence in who you are and what you're doing, and understand that they were not raised properly, and that you have to overcome it by understanding how those individuals are, and then engage other people who are like-minded as yourself, that we are all God's children. We're all the same. We should all be treated with respect and dignity. So I try to deal with that primary issue with him, which was the biggest thing I've seen so far that he's had to address. He doesn't seem to deal too much with the gender roles. As I indicated, he's pretty comfortable in himself as a boy. Thankfully, he's not dealing with any of those other 60 out there around. And education has been a big part of that too, right? So early on, I dispelled a lot of those myths that they put out there. Remember a lot of those myths that we've heard as kids, that anything that was discovered or invented. So I had to educate him and have him read books about the history of his people, Africans and African Americans, that we are, have a rich history, which gives him that sense of pride, I feel. And he really exudes it about himself, but he treats everyone with respect first and foremost. And so that's been the biggest thing. And I think ingraining that at the young age is going to help him in later instances, as Tariq said earlier, how that racism can detract from what your life can be. As I've dealt with it when I was younger and I stopped playing sports, for instance, that I was really good at, that could have opened up a whole door of life because of it. So we have to contend with that factor and help our kids understand how to deal with that particular ill in our society.
Thanks. Brother Siki, did you want to add some additional comments?
Sure. The war racism is what I would like to really address, because coming from where I came from in Nigeria, we don't even have racism there, even though we have a lot of corruption that is with the government. We don't have no racism there. We have something they call tribalism. But getting over here, I got a shock. I had so much shock, of my own first-hand experience, right? I would go to school and I was doing architecture at that time, and I would do a project or do some drafting or whatever it is. At that time, the teacher would give me a grade, but when he sees my name on it, he would turn into a lower grade. And I just couldn't figure it out why that is happening, until at a point that I realized that, okay, because of who I am, that's why that's happening. And it transferred me to when I started having my children and start to see what they have to deal with. So that's where I really know that even though the children, they are vulnerable, they are naive in so many ways, that racism part of it is something that I really have a hard time, because you cannot be there everywhere. You cannot be everywhere with them, and that's what really, really impacted me, that even though I want to protect them out there, I just cannot be everywhere with them. That's the only thing I really see, that it just handicapped me, that I can't go everywhere with them. Just, of course, it's very impossible to be everywhere, except if you are not a human. But that's the only thing that basically what baffles me about the society. And I just I pray for their guidance, for them to be protected from it, because it's not really something that you can control.
Thanks a lot. I want to just also ask all of you to extend on the issue of schools, and to what extent the educational institute your child is in or was most recently in, has it been a help or a hindrance? Has there been a clash between what was being taught at school versus what you taught in your own homes?
I don't think for me, we've had an issue with that. There is some racism at my daughter's school. We did have a small experience with that. It wasn't directed towards our kids, but some words were spoken in close proximity to our kids. And so I had to go and address that with the principal at the school. But, oddly enough, the principal is very fair, very balanced, and understands the plight of the Black community and understands how deep racism goes. He and I had a long conversation, and I felt very comfortable with him and how he led and operated that school, and how he expected his teachers, his staff, the administration to work towards a better society for all of us. So I don't think at our school we've had that issue of being taught different things, but there are influences at the school. But like I said, I do believe the principal had a good handle on controlling that. I felt very comfortable, like I said, with him after our discussion on some of the things that were said in close proximity to my daughters in regards to race. So I guess it's different for everyone, but yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna add that we chose the particular school that we did in order to avoid some of those factors, and a lot of parents are starting to choose Christian type school environments in order to avoid the dynamic of your child being taught or force fed certain ideologies that are propagated in our society today, particularly around gender or genders, the various genders and things of that nature. And then I think the school that he's currently in has been a help, has not been a hindrance, because of course they are strictly a Christian school and look at those values, and they support the children and their families in the ways in which they want to raise their children, not only from just a Christian perspective, but also the academic engagement side too. So we have not had to deal with many issues between the school and our home environment, thankfully, because that can detract from a child's academic achievement as well greatly. If there's a disconnect between the home environment and the school environment, as many of our children naturally are forced to deal with because of how the school system is set up, unfortunately.
Yeah, I haven't for my children, I haven't seen a big disparity in what they're taught at home and what they're being taught at school. Unfortunately, at least they're good at hiding it. And I haven't seen it in any school lessons plans. It's kind of the standard school curriculum. So I'm not what's the word? Not disappointed or not frustrated about their schooling. But I do agree with Mark. Like there's a term they call code switching. You know, the way you behave in your community versus the way you go in school. So that's just another fact of life that they'll learn that as they go on. And sometimes like to get the A, okay, I'll put this on paper. But really, when I go out there, that's not what I see. So it'll be a difference when they graduate.
Yes, indeed. Anyone else want to make a comment? Is school a help or a hindrance? And particularly with respect to the teaching about gender or the teaching about race. Any other comments before we go to the next question? All right, then. How do you combat the stereotypes about Black fathers? How do you combat the stereotypes about Black fathers?
But if I can take that, I think you are living by example, because most folks, their belief is that when they look at Black family, they always think that's absentee dad. That would depend on who that is. I can't say much about anybody else, but I know how involved I am with all my children, and the way they stereotype Black family is what baffles me the most. They don't think that Black fathers are doing enough, and there are truly Black fathers who are doing their best possible to be in their children's life. That's what they cannot just come out and just use the same brush every Black father out there. About according to the Black structure of family, they always think that we are not there. Whereas we really are. Even though we may not be living in the same household, but we are highly involved in everything they do. So that's one thing that really baffles me about the stereotype of Black family.
Thanks. Brother Mark, how do you combat the stereotypes about Black fathers?
Well, I combat it by being present, letting, in every environment that my son participates in, be it school or sports, I'm ever present. So if he's something academic. I'm helping to ensure that he's prepared for assignments. He's completing homeworks. I'm there for different academic events at schools and parent-teacher conferences. Sports, any sport he's played since he's been playing sports, I've always participated as a coach. Some folks would rather sit on the sideline. I figure I'd get the best seat in the house. I coach and ensure that his development is being done, and it's being fairly done as well. And I think that's the biggest part about combating that whole idea, is that we need, for the idea, first of all, we need to try to dispel the idea that is the case as it is, and that we're not a monolithic group also as Black fathers.
Mhm.
That there are a variety of Black men who are very present in their children's lives, more so than they like to lead us on to believe. Even as Mr. Erskine says, if we're not in the household, we're still present in their lives in a lot of ways. So that's one way that I do it, though, just by being present.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I want to say, I think that's it right there. Any event that you can be at, I think, is in order to dispel some idea or to remove it from existence, you have to, as you said, be present. And so you have to engage the people, the persons, the communities that believe a certain idea. And I know myself, I've been coaching for a long time. And so I'm heavily involved with other parents. I'm heavily involved in the school system, in this community. And so when folks get to meet me and share experiences with me, they know, okay, he's a decent guy. Now, whether I be Black, white, green, or yellow, but from being Black, they know Derek's a decent guy. And I think you hit it right on the head, is you have to be at those events. You have to engage those people. You have to show them how it is that you want them to see you. I mean, you teach people how to treat you, and they learn that from you as well. And so I think that's super important, is you got to be there and you got to engage folks, and they have to get to know you. If you are a father, I think that, you're in your children's lives, but you don't attend events, you don't go meet people, you don't help people understand who you are, then there will always be some sort of shadow over who you might be. And I want folks to know who I am. So there is no discussion later on down the road, oh, Derek wouldn't have done that, or Derek did this. I want folks to know who I am, and for them to be able to speak and stand in the gap for me later on down the road. So yeah, you have to be engaged, involved, and present, all those things. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say there were two parts to that, because there's the children, like the children see you as part of their lives, and that's the most important thing. But then there's our image, like it's not factual, but still there's this image that Black fathers are absent. There was even the CDC, can't remember the year, but the CDC report in 2013 where they were studying this and says, no, Black fathers are no less are equally involved or more than any other culture or race in the United States. So they, in the CDC, had to come out, but still you hear it. And I don't know where it's coming from. It's within our community or outside our community. But if we want to take back that image, as Derek and Marcus said, you gotta be out there at those events and show that you're there. So those are the two that the children know it. But then again, if you want the community and your image, you want to control your image, then you got to be out there.
Thank you. Brothers, are there values from your upbringing which you believe have hindered you in fathering your own children? Again, are there values from your own upbringing which you believe have hindered you in fathering your own children?
I could just
go ahead, Tariq.
Okay.
I'll just say one thing, and maybe it's I'm in the norm. That I'm not as, my wife would say, there's love languages. So I'm not a touchy person. And most people say, oh, that's for most males. So I don't know if that hinders me. I would think that my children feel loved for my presence and interested in what they're doing. But that's just the one thing. I'm not a touchy person. So that's, I don't know if that hinders anyone. There's all types of people and the way children want love expressed to them. But that's the one thing that's in my mind.
Yeah. Brother Ishiki, how about you?
I don't really feel that I have any hindrance from the value I was instilled upon. I just hope and I I pray that I'm more patient to the subject of my children's behavior sometimes. That's the only, because again, if I go back to what I said earlier on, like even when your father calls your name, the way you answer means a lot to an African father. I'm supposed to be here. Everything's all confrontational, and not in a bad way, but looking back from how I was raised, you have to find that conflict there because of society I have to just get used to. The patience is what I really think that I'm lacking as much, because my daughter gets on my case most of the time that I'm not listening, because I easily take offense in some things that I ought not to take offense on. So that patience is the only thing that is conflicting a little bit with everything about my children, but I'm working on it.
All right. How about Brother Mark? How about yourself?
No, I was gonna piggyback off of Tariq's points about not the touchy-feely part. Now, growing up, my father, being a traditional man from the South, wasn't touchy-feely as a father, but I knew he loved me, so I totally get that, Tariq, and I recognized that earlier on as an adult. So when I became a father, I wanted to be touchy-feely. So I'm more touchy-feely now than I was raised being touchy-feely, but I think that has helped in me be a better father for him, and to show him that he can be that way too, I guess. Not that it's like good or bad either way, because there are different, as we indicated, there are different ways and manners in terms of our love language. But that's one thing that I've always wanted as a child, I guess. Wanted to be hugged more. My mom would always hug me and everything, but I wanted my dad hugs too. But then he became ill and was bedridden, so he couldn't give me as many hugs, but he gave me lots of hugs still later on. And I think that's been a big thing. The one thing I might have modified is the way I punished my son. My parents, they didn't met out the corporal punishment. It was the belt. Only a few times on occasion. I was the youngest, so I got away with a lot, right? But I got him one time when he was younger, not with a belt, but I had to give him a spanking, like you said, Derek. You gotta, I had to take him. He did something that was bad, so I pulled over on the side of the road, jumped out the car, and I spanked him because I'll tell you, he blew raspberries at his teacher. Oh. And I'm like, you don't. Yeah. And we were talking, and the teacher, I think she called me on the phone. We were driving home, and I was like, oh, okay. And so I stopped where I was, and I had to, we talked, and he knew that he had done something wrong. And that was the only time I really had to, because he never wanted to feel the heaviness of my hands once again. So that was a good disciplining moment for him, I think. And it's been carried forward. I always ask him, do you want to feel the weight of these hands? No. Everything is fine.
Well, I think I was probably in that same boat, whereas my father was not terribly touchy-feely either, but my mother was overly so with me. And as a father, I guess I never had an issue being touchy-feely. I've always been a very loving individual. And granted, I didn't really get that from my father, but I got it from my mother. So as I grew up, I guess for me mentally, I never understood that I didn't have it. I didn't have that touchy-feely love from my father, because I always got it from my mom. My father always taught me things, always educated me on things, and shared things with me. And so my father played that fatherly buddy role, but always that alpha male. So I was never his friend per se, but I was always his little buddy. I was always his son. And so he taught me so many things and educated me and grew me up in a way that I should be. And then my mom loved the mess out of me. And so I believe in that perspective, I feel like I had the best of both worlds from that. Now, could he have been more loving and hugging and kiss? Oh, absolutely, 200%. But I got so much of it from my mom that as I became an adult, I was not lacking in that area. I mean, I went full bore with my babies. I mean, they probably want me to stop trying to hug them so much and all that nonsense. But I think I'm okay there.
What do you believe we need to instill in the Black community to strengthen the narrative around Black fatherhood? Again, the question, what do you believe we need to instill in the Black community to strengthen the narrative around Black fatherhood?
Man, that is a tough question. I think it is the support of Black fathers. I think so many of us as Black fathers may go down the wrong path as we grow in our fatherhood. If we're young fathers or middle age or older, I think we need a consistently growing support system so that we don't go off track. And I think as a community, if we can continue to do that, and as one of my old football coaches would say, do I need to slap you upside the back of the head? And sometimes you need that. And I think that's that support system that we have to continue to build. Even though we may go off track a little bit from time to time as Black fathers, we need that support system to keep us on track, to help support and help grow and understand how to be better fathers, so that down the road, there is not this issue or not so much of this issue. So for me, I think instilling in that in the Black community is, let's get behind our Black fathers as much as possible. We're asking them to lead these households. And so if we're asking them to lead these households, let's make sure that they have all the tools that they need and the support that they need consistently in order to be able to do that. And again, some will fall away and some will get distracted and be detracted from the job at hand. But with a great continuing to grow support system, I think we'll be where we need to be, hopefully one day. But that's it for me.
Okay. Brother Siki, what do you believe we need to instill in the Black community to strengthen the narrative around Black fatherhood?
I believe that it's just more support from our community, really. More support that we Black father need. Some of us get really frustrated from the relationship we have to carry on to be a father. It sometimes affects us here. As a Black father, my son just became a father a couple of months ago, and he's now seeing what it is to be a father, and all I can do is support him and tell him that it's going to be better as we go along. Being a young father, I wasn't as young as he. I think I had my own first child at the age of 29, so he's about 27. So, the support is what we really need, from the family structure. That's what I think.
Okay, Brother Tariq.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because the initial thought was like, need more Black nuclear families, so more marriages. I don't know what the overall marriage rate in the U.S. if it's 50-50. It could be lower in the Black community, but need more of that. Single parenthood is probably, I think, maybe in the 70s. I don't know. But going back to like Derek, what rang with me, he said, leader of the household. And so to be in the house, think that household, it's a family. So it's, I think of a marriage. And so we just need more Black marriages, the father, mother in the house, raising children together. The father's present, the mother's present. So more marriages, commitment to marriage and a nuclear family.
Thanks. Brother Mark.
Yes, so I agree with everything that Tariq said. I think the percentages are about 47% now of people are married, and then there's I forget the stats for it. People, the ages at which we're getting married is extended too. So people are not getting married as early. And then that causes a lot more problems, particularly around being single and then having children out of wedlock. And now you're having multiple baby mamas and all these other factors that come into play that detract from this ideal of being a Black father. I think we need to try to get the narrative. Somehow we have to pull the narrative back and reassert it as a positive from what it has been, because apparently there's some kind of negativity tied to it, or individuals don't want the responsibility, as Tariq and Derek had also indicated, that But I think we need to instill pride and respect in the ideal of being a father, and because children model the environments that they're raised in. So when you had that epidemic in the 80s into the 90s of this teen babies having babies and teen mothers and single mothers, that then propelled the age of Black men realizing or thinking to themselves, I guess not realizing, but thinking that they didn't have to be there because they saw what was happening in their communities, and they grew up from young boys to model that behavior. So we need to try to change that narrative, even if we're fathers, being present in the lives of children as mentors to show them that they can be fathers, that it's the thing that a man is supposed to do, be a part of a family unit, not just be a daddy who goes out and creates babies, but being someone there who's providing for the family and protecting the family and helping to raise the children. I think changing that narrative and trying to infuse something into that, and being present again, fathers just being present. I've seen a lot of different initiatives where they've asked for volunteers to come to schools and things like that. And I think it's more Black fathers, more of us who are being Black fathers and are just being involved in other children's lives as an example of that would probably help.
Yes,
Black
indeed.
Father University.
Mhm. And which perhaps the church could take on. Well, in any event, gentlemen, I want to thank you all for your perspicacity, your wealth of knowledge, your diverse perspectives. And I am going to turn this back over to Dr. Alicia D. Williams for our closeout. Take it away, Dr. Williams.
Thank you so much, CR. And thank you to Tariq and Derek and Dr. Lee and Matt, who's on the phone with us. We appreciate all that you shared with us. I think from the very beginning, with the focus on defining fatherhood, centering on God's example of fatherhood, to a focus on ensuring that values of compassion and modeling outcomes and not being afraid to do the work. To what I think, Matt, you talked about, it looks impossible until it's done. That was a great nugget to take away.
Yeah.
And to the challenges about race and about social media and how that impacts our children. But ultimately, the importance of being present as a Black father, just being there, showing up for your children, for other children, and that knowing that your community is behind you, I think has been marvelous takeaways from our time today. So again, thank you so much. And I'll turn it over to Sherelle to officially close us out for today.
Thank you, Alicia. I actually want to thank all of you guys as well. The one thing that I've always struggled with was also a cultural difference between an African father versus a Black father. And what I have learned from this conversation is just seems like what's aligned with fatherhood is learning, and that you guys are very adaptable to learning what's going on in your environment, especially for those who are dealing with young teens and teenagers coming up very soon. Conversation about sex and gender is definitely going to play a big role. And from what I heard from all of you guys is that it all aligns with learning and being acceptable and adapting to what's going on in time. So I want to thank you all for spending some time with us today to drop off what your definition of fatherhood is. And, it's great to see Black fathers in households, out in communities, and doing much more. We want to thank you for joining Race Today. And we're going to be posting this up on our social media platforms. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to myself and or Alicia. And again, thank you so much for having this great conversation about fatherhood, Black fatherhoods at that.
Thank you. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Nice meeting you
Y'all
all.
have a nice day.
Nice meeting you all.